Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Meet and Eat Together. My name is Melissa Gerson. I'm a psychotherapist and also the clinical director of Columbus Park, which is a treatment center for eating disorders in New York City. And I'm also the director of My Three Square virtual support, which is the platform we're using today. It's nice to see you, and it's really nice to see my guest, Lynn Slawsky, who's here with me today. Hi, Lynn. Lynn is the executive director of the National Association of Anorexia, Nervosa, and Associated Disorders. So today we're going to talk to her about what brought her to eating disorder, the eating disorder world. She's going to share a bit about her own personal experience, and she's also going to talk to us about resources that are available to the community now and longer term. So before we talk to Lynn, we're gonna begin our therapeutic meal. So the purpose of the structure of these hours that we're spending together replicate a treatment setting and the therapeutic meals that we do in that setting. So we're going to walk through the structure, which begins typically with checking in about the actual meal that we've all brought. Generally, in an outpatient setting, our patients, the group, they bring their own meal to the hour. That allows them to have the opportunity to practice with portioning, plating their food, selecting their food, and then we give some feedback about the meal that they bring to the table so that they can begin to kind of shape their decision making around that feedback. We generally give very, very, very non-specific guidance around the meal. We ask people to bring a balanced meal. We want to make sure that the meal is adequate to meet their needs. The guideline we set is that we ask that the meal have a balance between carbohydrate, protein, and adequate fat. There can be a fruit and vegetable as well. Typically, a meal that we would recommend would be bringing something like a sandwich to lunch with some kind of a side, or people can bring a salad as long as it has protein in it, adequate fat, real dressing, and some kind of carbohydrate component that we usually ask people to have on the side. So it might be a salad with chicken and avocado with real dressing and a side of a roll or some kind of bread or something like that. So I'm going to share my meal for the day to start. Today, I'm trying something a little bit different. I am having a ham and cheese sandwich on bread with a handful of potato chips, and I'm having an orange juice. So it's a little different for me in that I don't remember the last time I had a ham and cheese sandwich. It's in the house because my parents are staying with us during this crisis, and that's a thing my dad eats all the time. And there's not as much access right now, as everybody knows, to the normal foods that we eat. So I figured I would try it. So let's see. So the way that I selected my meal was based on what I had around. Then in making the sandwich, I put on a few slices of ham. I put on a couple slices of cheese. I used some honey mustard. When I pulled out the potato chips, I just, grabbed a handful and I put them on my plate. And then today I thought I would do the orange juice. I often drink club soda with my meals, but I kind of felt like orange juice today. I'm really hungry, so I figured I could use the extra bit that the orange juice of energy that the orange juice provides. And I'm also aware that many people who struggle with eating disorders have some restrictions around caloric beverages. There's often this idea that it's not worth the calories, or you shouldn't have your calories in the form of liquid. But I'm trying to practice my flexibility around allowing myself to have the calories in a liquid. I'm going to enjoy the orange juice. It looks great to me. And I figured I would kind of just model that flexibility for anyone out there who might struggle with the concept of a caloric beverage. So Lynn, you're smiling because I'm sure you connect with that.
Yeah, definitely. And also, my toddler is watching.
Oh goodness. Okay.
So she's laughing at the cartoons that she's watching.
Okay. Thank you for the heads up. So Lynn's daughter is nearby. She's little. She may interrupt, but we're going to do the best we can anyway.
Yeah, she has great attention span when it comes to cartoons. So yes, we're hoping for the best. And in this pandemic time, we're all having to juggle a lot. So thanks for bearing with me and for your understanding on that. Yeah. And so do you want me now to
share what you brought for your lunch?
Okay. Yeah. So I also brought a sandwich because sandwiches are easy to put together. And it's turkey and provolone today, with some spinach on the bottom, just to add a little bit of color and vegetable. And then I added pesto to add some flavor and some good fat to a very otherwise lean sandwich. So I always try to add either mayo or pesto because that makes the sandwich a little more filling for me than just deli meat and cheese. And then I also have some black bean soup as my side. And it's also very filling, lots of fiber, which I love, and has some vegetable content in it. I threw in a little bit of diced bell pepper just to add some crunch to it because I love a variety of textures and everything I eat. So I also toasted the bread so that would also be a little crunchy. I'm kind of wishing I had some potato chips like you because it is so nice to have crunch with your meal. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to eating this meal.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
So what we do generally after we check in about our meal components, we set an intention for the meal. So the intention is some kind of a goal or some sort of element of the experience that you're going to be working on. So an example of an intention might be that you're going to try to distract yourself from negative thoughts by focusing in on the conversation during meal. Yeah. I would say that's a really big intention that we see a lot of people choosing at our meals, that they really want to try to be present in the conversation. They want to really connect with people during the meal, even though they may be distracted by thoughts about the food or how they're feeling or maybe some anxiety. Mm-hmm. So that's one intention. Some people are working on their pacing. Do they want to work on speeding up the meal or slowing down the meal? Some people are working on specific skills that they've been practicing in their therapy. Some of the ones that we've spoken about recently have been practicing self-compassion during a meal. That's a nice one, or self-validation during the meal. So right now would be a great time to just think about something you want to consider during the meal. And then we often will check in on how we're feeling going into the meal, and noticing that there are certain feelings that can impact your how it feels to eat. So I think everyone probably is aware that when we feel anxious or worried, it can impact appetite, whether your response to anxiety or worry is that you lose your appetite or you actually seek food, like the soothing nature of food. So one of the things we'll do at the beginning is just check in on, are we feeling anxious? Are we feeling sad? Are we feeling content, peaceful? All of these emotions can impact our eating. And when we go into the meal, we also just say, regardless of how you're feeling, you still need to eat your meal. You still need to get that nutrition and that energy. And it's such an important part of the recovery process, is having that stability of regular eating. So we reinforce that concept, and then we go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a little timer, and I'm going to let you know when we're 15 minutes into the meal. And then I'm also going to let you know when we have 5 minutes left. And the objective here is that I have a little a little photo bomber. Hey, Owen, out. Okay, come on. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. Oh, Owen, come on. Out. Someone has to rescue it because he's interrupting. Okay. Whoa. That's the first time that's happened, and I'm surprised it hasn't happened before that. So,
right.
As I was saying, so I'll let you know when we're halfway through, and then I'll let you know when we have 5 minutes left. And that's just a way. It can sound a little stressful that there's something timed to this, but it's more just a way of us being aware of the amount of time that it takes for eating, because many people who are working on their eating disorders notice that they can take a really long time when they eat, or they might eat very quickly. So we're just working on normalizing the pacing. So right. I'll keep track of the time.
Yeah.
And we're going to begin eating. And Lynn, you may not be able to eat as much while we're talking because you're probably going to talk a lot. But anyone who's working on pacing and wants to, look at my pacing as a lead, I'm going to try to keep a steady pace, eat my lunch as we're talking. So don't, forgive me if my mouth is full as I'm talking. So Lynn, you have, your life is eating disorders. You are, running this amazing group. ANAD, we call it, for the National Association of Anorexia, Nervosa, and Associated Disorders. Did I get that right?
Exactly.
So we call it ANAD. Tell us how you got to this field.
Yeah. Thanks for, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this meal with you. It's rare these days that I get to share a meal with anyone besides my husband and daughter. So this is nice. Okay. So the way I got to this current job, I'm executive director of ANAD, and we had an opening for a role in fundraising. And I had recently been laid off from my hospital job, and was beginning to look for a new role. And this just happened to come my way. A friend asked me if I was interested in fundraising. My background is project management. And I think the skill set is similar, basically relationship building, communications. And I had never done specifically fundraising, but I thought I would probably be okay trying. And so I gave it a whirl, and it just so happens that it's for an organization that is near and dear to my heart. I have recovered from anorexia myself, had it throughout my 20s. And I think that working in this organization and hearing other people's stories has helped me so much in normalizing my story and being okay and open about sharing my story as, another chapter in my life and my development. And I think it's solidified my recovery a lot more and held me more accountable to my recovery, since I am now a leader of an organization that's trying to help people out of their eating disorders. So it's all been very reaffirming, and feels like it was meant to be that this opportunity happened to come my way. So
would you be open to sharing a bit about your own recovery? Because I'd imagine your own treatment experience, your own recovery experience must influence your work and your passion right now. Are there elements of your own recovery that come to mind that you want to share with people, whether it be turning points or certain factors that really helped you move forward?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So ANAD is all about support and finding support and building a system of support. And we provide support services to complement family support, friend support, loved ones. And I would say that really was key for me and my recovery is feeling okay to open up to my family and friends and my husband specifically about my struggles, and then just being very intentional about building that support and having a therapist. I actually never went to a residential treatment center. I used all outpatient treatment, but I was very committed to it and regular about it. And then having that plus family support was really very crucial in starting the recovery process. Definitely.
That's something I've heard from, we've had a number of different guests join the program talking about their recovery. And I think that's one common thread for everybody has been the importance of connection and relationships and allowing people to support you and asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
And so So that's really interesting. And right now is a particularly difficult time where all of us, whether we're in the midst of an eating disorder and working on recovery, or whether we're not,
Yeah.
we're all having such a hard time with connection. You know, we're obviously just so isolated, and when we are connecting, it's by video or by phone. You know, can you speak to that? You know, I'm sure have you guys been getting more calls, or people struggling more right now from your perspective? And has there been anything in particular that you've noticed has been helpful to people who are calling in? In particular around like accessing connection and support, particularly during this time?
Yeah. Well, we've been actually very impressed with how quickly treatment centers and other programs and group therapy groups like yours have been able to pivot to virtual telehealth offerings. And to me, there are some advantages. It's much more convenient.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more accessible. You don't need transportation. You don't need a lot of preparation time to get to it. And insurance has been very quick. From what I understand, insurance has been pretty quick about allowing for these telehealth sessions. So yes, we are seeing an uptick in calls to our helpline asking just for help. Like, I feel so isolated. This is really triggering my eating disorder behaviors. I'm living alone and I'm having trouble navigating grocery shopping right now. And so we're able to provide resources. So we offer virtual support groups. We have 2 a day now. We're up to about 2 per day.
Mm-hmm.
And but then which is really great. We're also able to recommend professional providers who are offering virtual options right now. So we leave every helpline call feeling like we've been able to provide some resources and real options. And
are the groups that you're running twice a day, are they interactive so that people, they are. Wow. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a real connection. You're actually connecting with a community, with other people who are struggling as well. And is there a facilitator?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Each of our support groups has a trained facilitator who's been through our training and then kind of leads the discussion. These are non-clinical support groups, so we're not following any particular program, but we are providing a safe and open space to share just concerns. And honestly, the support group that I'm part of, we're not even talking that much about eating disorders right now. It's more just dealing with the isolation and just how that's going.
Yeah, it's sort of it's hard to hear that other people are also struggling. It's also validating to hear how many people are really struggling with the isolation, because it's really something, most of us have never experienced anything quite like this. Really just the idea that you walk down the street and you're dodging people. It just
it feels so
like being human and wanting connection, and this mistrust. There's almost this built-in mistrust. I can't go near you because what if you've been exposed?
I know. And now with everyone wearing masks, it's like you can't even at people. So I've started like waving and trying to like audibly say good morning, just to try to be friendly, because it can feel very lonely even when you're outside seeing other people that you can't like see them smile, which is such a basic physical gesture.
You that we give one another. That's we're welcoming you. We see it's saying that I see you. I'm welcoming you. I'm friendly. I'm a friendly being. And so I didn't even think about that. The mouth is being covered. We're not even getting that input. That like
I learned that from my daughter, because we've seen a few people outside. Everyone's wearing masks, and I'll say, Ellie, smile, say hi, smile. And she refuses to smile because she's not seeing anyone else smile.
So, I mean, this is just an unimaginable time. And for people struggling with food, even if you're not struggling with food right now, food is so hard. It's so hard to manage. And there's just this anxiety. Will I get what I need? How will I get what I need? And in particular, people with eating disorders, usually there's a lot of concern and preparation around eating, because that flexibility piece is not always there. It's really hard when you're in the midst of an eating disorder to go with the flow and eat what's available.
Right.
So that's, I would imagine folks who are coming into your support groups are communicating some difficulty there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's, that actually was the theme of our discussion in the support group I was part of on Monday, was talking about flexibility and being gentle with ourselves and being okay with not getting activity every day, because sometimes the weather is crappy and we can't go to the gym. And so it just isn't feasible, and that's totally okay during this time. This is a time, in times of crisis, are times to be gentle and understanding and flexible. And I would say that this time has been so reaffirming. It has forced me to come to terms with that yet again. There's been like different seasons of my life and my recovery where I've come to the realization that being flexible is so important to recovery. I would say I did that in my early 30s, but I had to go through that again when I was pregnant and dealing with a newborn, and learning that I had very little control over any aspect of my life when I was taking care of a newborn. And then I would say this pandemic is like this new chapter of realizing how important flexibility is.
It's amazing how many, there's so many life experiences that end up punctuating that, even more than just the day-to-day. I'm curious, as someone who, well, first off, it's really nice to hear from someone who recovered from anorexia and had children, was able to have a baby. So that's amazing. And it speaks to the fact that most often when people recover from anorexia, it's one of these things that's like totally reversible. Most of the health effects that may have been, there because of the eating disorder really reverse. And so it's totally possible to move on from anorexia and have a very full and normal life. So that's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Can you speak a bit to the experience of being pregnant after, post-recovery, and how that might have impacted you, maybe in a different way than it would someone who'd never had an eating disorder?
Yeah. Yeah. So pregnancy actually was fine, because I knew I was supposed to gain weight. And I knew I was supposed to eat more. And I knew I needed to do whatever I possibly could to get through the morning sickness and the nausea and all of that. So I really, truly allowed myself to feed my body, and also, this body growing inside of me. So pregnancy was actually far less triggering for me than the postpartum period, where I suddenly had this notion that I needed to lose all my baby weight immediately, or that I would lose all my baby weight immediately.
Right. Yeah.
What's wrong with me that I'm not? And
you see tons of celebrities who do it.
I know. Everyone's saying, well, if you breastfeed, all the weight will just melt off. And no, that was not happening for me. So that really was difficult for me. On top of that, I started experiencing postpartum anxiety. And studies do show that when you have a history of an eating disorder, you're 50% more likely to develop postpartum anxiety than if you haven't. And sure enough, I was one of those people who got postpartum anxiety. And so I had to get that under control, started on medication, and that unfortunately took what seemed like forever to start helping, but it did eventually. And just slowly things started calming down. My hormones started calming down. It was a very troubling time. And it, looking back on that experience, it's such a good lesson and how little control you have, and how in my 20s, when I was in the throes of my eating disorder, you're looking to food as the way to control. And it was, when I was postpartum, it was just like survival day by day. So
You really had to find some other means of coping.
absolutely. Yeah. And there again, that's where my support network came in. I mean, my therapist like coached me every single session, like make sure you're calling on your support system, talk to anyone, everyone you need. Your parents are retired, so you can call them any time of day and things like that. So that was important.
Yeah. So can you speak a bit to what being recovered looks like? I think it's such a hard thing to define.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm hearing from you is that, it obviously you've recovered, you're dedicating your life to health and helping other people who are recovered, and
Mm-hmm.
you're living your full life now. But life is obviously difficult for everybody. And, can you speak a bit to how, when difficult, a little bit more to what it looks like in recovery when difficulties come up, and how
Mm-hmm.
much of the old thoughts do you see? Do they pop
Yeah.
in? And if
Yeah.
so, how do you manage them? Like what do you rely on? What do you know works for you to stay
Mhm.
steady?
Yeah. That's such a good question. And so let's see. Um, yeah, it's a day by day thing. I think it's making an intention, as we did with this meal at the beginning, making an intention every day to be gentle on yourself and to be forgiving of any of the thoughts we are having, and to recognize that they are thoughts, and the thoughts are not defining who we are. They are simply thoughts. Um, and so when I start feeling myself being hard on myself for whatever, for like how my body is looking, or not getting enough exercise in the day because I'm stuck at home with a toddler who just wants to watch cartoons for hours on end. You really have to remind yourself that it is a day by day thing, and recovery, I think, is a choice every single day. And it's an intention, and it's not going to be perfect every day. And there are times when um, things slide, and then you realize, and you go back to where your goals are. And but yeah, it definitely is. And we talk about that all the time in our support services. Our recovery mentorship program is set up for this reason. So our mentorship program is designed for people who have been through treatment, and are on their path to recovery, but still need someone to talk to on a regular basis about their recovery. And so we pair them with people who have been recovered for at least 2 years, to provide a friend who can relate to the experience of how difficult it is to go back to so-called normal life, while recovering from an eating disorder.
That's so powerful. That's an
Yeah,
amazing sport. Yeah.
being in a residential treatment program, even an IOP, an intensive outpatient program, you're like in the zone doing the program, and then you go back to your regular life and everything else is the same. It's just you who have developed this tool set and
Mhm.
the skill set around recovery. And so we've designed our mentorship program to acknowledge the fact that it is really difficult to live in normal, so-called normal life every day, when you've had these like enlightening experiences, but you've had them, like everyone else is just living their normal
Yeah.
lives. And
Yeah.
so talking to a mentor who has been through the recovery process and can say, oh yeah, I remember when I was learning those skills, and it was so difficult when my mom like could not relate to what I
Mhm.
was trying to do with my new meal plan and things like that. And yeah, so just having someone to talk to who can relate to to what you're going through is
I have a
is
question.
very powerful.
Is that program only for people who have completed treatment, or can they be in any stage of the process, even just contemplating treatment?
We require that, and it is self-disclosed, but we do require that the mentee, the person who's seeking help, has some sort of professional support. So that can be an outpatient therapist, that could be a dietitian, but someone professional who is working with them.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great program. Are there any other programs that we should know about that you haven't mentioned yet? You have the support groups twice daily. You have the mentor program.
Yeah.
Obviously,
and then
referrals, like people can call in if they're looking for a therapist that takes a certain insurance, or they're looking for a particular program.
Right.
Have a network of providers. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We do a lot of research. We'll spend sometimes half an hour doing research on any particular case, and to find the best recommendations we can for professional treatment through our helpline. We also accept emails at hello@anid.org. Same type, it functions as our helpline essentially.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then we also offer a lot of educational materials. Our website has a wealth of information on both on descriptions of eating disorders and statistics, but we also have some guides. We have a self-help book on binge eating disorder. We have one on meant for educators to learn more about how to recognize eating disorders among students. We just came out with an ANID guide about supporting a loved one through the various stages of recovery. Because as you just alluded to, Melissa, there are different stages, and we want to be able to help someone no matter where they are in their recovery. But there are different ways to support that person based on where they are in the recovery. And so we describe the stages of change, and how to communicate effectively with someone who's at a particular stage.
That's so great. Do you have, I'm curious if you have any insight into new directions in treatment, or any of the research more recently that's come up that sticks out to you as particularly interesting or exciting?
Yeah.
And you can chew first. I'm sorry. I always ask questions when someone takes a bite.
Yeah. There's a couple that I'm aware of. I went to a conference recently with a session on temperament-based therapy.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting to me, because the whole idea is how to embrace or how to lean into the personality traits that give someone the disposition for developing an eating disorder, primarily anorexia. Right now it is more focused on anorexia, but how to use the personality traits towards positive means and ends. How to channel the perfectionism and the incredibly hard work ethic, and the predilection towards organizing and things like that, towards positive ends. And I thought that was, and it's meant to be an adjunct to other therapies and treatment programs. So it's definitely not a replacement. It's meant to be a supplement. But I think it from what I heard at the conference, it does show a lot of promise in the initial evidence that was produced there. The other technology that I'm becoming more interested in is TMS,
transmagnetic stimulation.
There you go. Thank you. Which is a so-called alternative to medication. And it's being touted as a no side effect treatment for eating disorders. And I think it does involve, I don't know too much about it, but it does involve brainwave stimulation.
I know it's used with depression.
Okay. Yeah. And it makes sense that it would have some applicability to eating disorders, because there's so much comorbidity on those fronts.
Yeah. And it's these eating disorders are brain-based, so they're biologically based conditions where they really originate in the brain, and how certain brains are kind of structured and have the neurotransmitter within the brain sort of. Oh, 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
No, it's okay. Not intended to make you rush. So that does make sense that there would be some way of stimulating the brain that could impact both emotion and behavior.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so we are hoping to have a conference in September to feature research like this, like what I've just named. Our conference is geared towards professionals who specialize in eating disorder treatment. And while most of our support services, all of our support services are intended for individuals themselves in recovery and their families, we do feel that it's very important to maintain as strong a connection to professionals as possible.
Yeah.
We have this conference every year to make sure that professionals are aware of our free support services, which we fully intend to be a complement to professional treatment. And then we want to make sure that they know about us so that they can send their clients our direction once their clients are through formal treatment. So.
I appreciate the reminder of all of your services, and it's so nice to hear from you today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to jump in now. So we've more or less completed the eating portion of our therapeutic meal. Generally we try to, when we're in person, we try to ask that people have finished their meal by this time. And we do ask that they complete the meal, because many of the, it depends on where someone is in their recovery process. There are exceptions, because we may be working with someone who's really working on noticing hunger, fullness cues and being more responsive to their bodies. But typically, earlier in recovery, and especially I'd say with like anorexia, like restrictive conditions, for example, anorexia, all eating disorders end up incorporating a restrictive element, unfortunately. But, if there's restriction, it's really hard to access your fullness accurately, because there's that voice in your head that's telling you that you should be done, that is enough, that you don't want to overdo it, or whatever that particular messaging is. So we like to take the guesswork out of it, and we ask our patients to bring a meal that's adequate, that meets their needs roughly, and then we do ask that they complete it. So, and then at the end we check, we want to make sure that everybody's completed. I completed my meal. Then we usually check in about how everybody's feeling. And we do that very briefly, because we don't want to open up a lot of emotion after a meal. Actually, what we really want to do is kind of buckle up again, and in the service of moving on from the meal. So we'll usually check in to see how people are feeling, just taking the temperature in the room. Oftentimes people will describe feeling anxious after eating, or feeling guilty after eating. And what we'll do at that point is really focus in on, okay, so what kind of plan do you have? What's your plan for managing the thoughts that are going to come in, and still staying, in line with your meal plan? And so what we'll often do is some kind of a thought blocking exercise, or we'll teach a skill that's designed to support someone in coping. And so I'm actually going to teach a skill today. This is a skill, like many of the skills I teach here, I use a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy, not just because I think it's a great therapy that has been studied to be effective for treating in a lot of different conditions. One of the reasons why I really like it is that it's really designed to address behavioral problems. And when I say behavioral problems, I mean problems that manifest in certain behaviors, like an eating disorder, where the concern is absolutely the emotional underpinnings and the emotional life of this person who's struggling, but also what are the actual behaviors, and how do we change the behaviors in service of getting better. So I like ACT because it's very behaviorally oriented. I also like it because it's designed to increase flexibility, psychological flexibility, and particularly in an eating disordered mindset, flexibility is very hard. There's a lot of very set ideas, a very fearful approach to food, really to a lot of things, even new experiences. And so oftentimes in the treatment, we're working on just kind of easing in and getting a little bit more flexible. So there's a big focus on flexibility in ACT. The other thing I really like about it is that it's not a big talking therapy, it's more of a doing therapy. So you are actually, using metaphors and stories to do the work. So I'm going to give you a metaphor today. This is called the playground bully metaphor. And it relates to the negative thoughts, the judgmental thoughts that we often have in our heads. And that people who struggle with eating disorders talk about the chatter and how that's there from morning until night in many cases. And it's so hard to silence those thoughts. And we find that those thoughts tend to there are certain times in the day where they rise up a bit more, and after mealtime is a time when they tend to rise up. So I'm going to ask everybody to recognize those thoughts as the playground bully. So I want you to imagine that your head is kind of like a playground. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in your head and in the playground, and you're really kind of fenced in there. And the children in your head need to learn how to live with this bully that's living there. And the bully uses threats and mocking and abusive words to upset his victims. And we really, we can't stop the bully, but we have to think about we might be able to stop the bully, but our focus right now is not getting the bully out completely. The focus right now is about how do we react to those bully gestures differently. And so there are kind of three options, maybe many more options, but the options I'm going to talk about right now, there are three. And so the first way of managing the bully is to believe the bully. And when you believe the bully and all of the thoughts and threats and words that the bully is unleashing on you, we tend to become distressed and we become reactive. It may lead to certain behaviors. It may lead to certain impulses that we might follow through on. And so instead of actually believing the bully, we're gonna try what the second victim is going to do. So we can either buy into the bully thoughts and act on them, or we could challenge the bully. We could fight the bully. We could try to change the bully. We could try to convince the bully that what they're saying is not true. And then eventually the bully may give up on the victim, and that's perfectly justified. That's a perfectly reasonable way to approach the bully. But the third way is maybe an easier way. The third way is to acknowledge the bully, but then keep trying to ignore the bully and focus your attention on something else. Because the more the bully tries to mock you or threaten you or hurt you, the more you kind of ignore the bully and shift your attention to something else, the more likely the bully is to lose some of the power and to give up. And so in ACT, we talk a lot about allowing the bully to be there. We don't have to say that the thoughts are untrue. We don't have to find some way of explaining out the thought or saying how it's actually not valid. The thought can actually be there, but we just want to invest a little bit less in that thought. And the idea is that if we invest less in it and we do anyway, we act anyway, we live our lives anyway, even with a thought there, the idea is that the bully begin to die down. And this is without question true. If you think about it, if every time you had all these negative thoughts, if instead of taking the thoughts, believing them and acting on them, which is so natural to do because we're really designed to pay attention to our thoughts and our feelings, right? Like that's really important for our self-care and for our survival. When we have thoughts, we want to respond to them. But in some cases, it can actually be more damaging to respond to certain thoughts. And so the idea is that we're not going to prove them wrong. We're not going to make them go away. We're just going to keep turning the mind and turning our attention to something that's important and engaging in activities that are life affirming and life expanding, as opposed to some activities that in the short term feel good but are restricting life. So I encourage you to think about it. Think about those thoughts, not as even generating from you, but this idea that there's this bully inside you and the bully pushes you around. And you're just going to try some different strategies for managing the bully. And, if you think about it, maybe when you were little, people always said, walk away, just walk away. Don't fight. You're going to get in more trouble if you fight the bully. And the bully's not going anywhere. You have to find a way to make peace with the bully and, try walking away. So understanding that you're not going to be able to walk away immediately, but if you keep practicing, you'll become better and better at turning your mind away, of lowering the volume on the bully and attending to things that are really important to you. So Lynn, it was so good to see you today. I'm so happy that you joined us.
Yeah. And what a great skill and tool to share, Melissa. That's really great visual, that we might add that to our repertoire of skills for our mentors to share with their mentees. Yeah, I think that's it's just a really powerful visual that sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, and and other people are far less critical of us than we tend to be on ourselves. So, and particularly during this time of pandemic, it's more important than ever. We're spending so much more time with ourselves. So it's more important than ever to be nicer to ourselves and to be less of a bully.
As you're saying that, it brought to mind something else that happened this week. So over the weekend, I'm a mother also, so you'll probably connect with this, but my kids were behaving terribly, which one would expect under the current circumstances. And I was noticing myself just being very impatient with them. I was tending toward, instead of speaking nicely, I was kind of raising my voice and being very like the drill sergeant, and it didn't feel great. And it actually wasn't really working.
Right.
And I'm kind of being kind to myself when I say I was being the drill. I mean, I was yelling, a lot. Not really, it wasn't good for my self-esteem because I didn't feel like I wasn't proud of the way I was responding to the challenge. But on Monday, I decided to start over as a beginner, and I decided to try a different strategy. And so I acted in opposite. We teach this a lot as the skill opposite action. I decided to act in opposite of how I was feeling. So as I was getting really angry, I was trying to just be really gentle and use like a kind of a quieter, more gentle voice. And honestly, as soon as it started, my kids looked at me like they were shocked. They couldn't believe it. They were like, "Are you okay?" And the next thing that happened was they were loving to me. Like I got some really positive feedback from them, very loving feedback, a lot of reinforcement. "Oh, it feels so good. You're being so nice, mommy." And I noticed that my kids started to behave better. So, I mean, look, it's not over. Trust me. The angry mommy, crazy mommy is going to come back out again. But it really told me that it started making me think about how we talk to ourselves and how, if you think about the internal bully or the internal coach, even when we want more behavior from ourselves, we need to encourage ourselves. We need to be kind and loving, and you're more likely to get the behavior that you're looking for rather than, bringing out the whip and being harsh.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I think it works with kids, and I think it works with ourselves.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Let's just take that message and run with it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's really nice. So thanks for sharing that today.
Enjoy. And for those of you out there, I hope you'll join us again. If you come to our website, it's, what is it? my3square.com/live. You'll see the calendar of events. Next week is Project Heal Week. So we have a bunch of people coming from Project Heal. They'll be talking about services at Project Heal, but also each person is going to share their own story. So it should be pretty motivating and uplifting. We're going to teach some more skills. So feel free to join us again. Feel free to share with friends or tag friends, anyone that you think might find this platform to be supportive or helpful. And I hope to see you again.
Yeah.